This is an absolutely brilliant opportunity for us to hear about the creation of, I think we all agree, is one of the best TV shows of recent years. And we have got all the key players here to explain how it all came about, how it was made, and all of that. So I'd like to introduce the panel. First of all, there are only 4 of us here, and there's another extra chair. Don't worry, Olivia Colman, we're assured, is on her way. She's going to, you know, like on Graham Norton when he's got loads of A-list guests and then like Brad Pitt comes in halfway through because he's at a premiere. It's that kind of thing. Hopefully at some point she'll be walking through those doors and we'll all give her a very dramatic round of applause and it'll all be very exciting. If she doesn't show up, then apologies in advance. But she is supposed to be, yeah, she's supposed to be on her way. But let me introduce the panel who are here, first of all. Chris Chibnall wrote, created, and co-exec produced Broadchurch. Among his other stuff that he's worked on includes Law and Order UK, Torchwood, The Great Born and Bred, Doctor Who, that kind of thing.
I love you for that.
The Great Born and Bred.
It's never been called that.
It was The Great Born and Bred. And Camelot in America, which he loved doing. He loved doing Camelot. We'll hear about that in a minute. Jane Featherston here is the co-exec producer and chief executive of Kudos. And of course, Kudos' massive hits include Life on Mars, Ashes to Ashes, Spooks, and The Tunnel, which has just been on Sky, still on Sky, in fact. The brilliant Utopia, one of the best dramas of last year, apart from Broadchurch, which is on Channel 4. And coming up soon on Sky One, The Smoke. And we have James Strong, the director of Broadchurch, who also worked with Chris on the film United, which was the brilliant one-off film about the Munich air crash and the Busby Babes at Manchester United. He's also directed Downton Abbey. You may have heard of it. Hustle, Silent Witness, Doctor Who, pretty much the biggest shows on TV. You've done them all, James. Some of them. Yeah. That's our absolutely brilliant panel. So let's start, Chris, by talking about the fact that on the 26th of September 2012, you handed in the script of Broadchurch to Jane, and then by the 26th of January, it had been commissioned. Isn't that right? That seems pretty extraordinary. Is the whole genesis of the show kind of extraordinary and not how it normally works on TV? Is that fair?
Yeah, it was unusual from the start, really. I mean, it was born out of pain, and I'm sorry if anybody's heard this story before, because it's
Camelot pain.
It's my therapy. These events, because I did this show called Camelot, which was for Stars in the US, and the single most miserable experience of my life. Never again. 13 executive producers, very unhappy with the show, terrible process, and I got pneumonia, number one. Right. I ended up in hospital, thought perhaps my career choices aren't where I want to be going, and took a couple of months off and wrote Broadchurch on spec. Sam Hoyle, who is the script executive on Broadchurch, had worked with me on Camelot, and as an apology, I said to her, come down to my house and we'll storyline something. It will be fun. It won't be miserable, and we'll do that. And so we did that. We got some whiteboards and we storylined a thing in my back garden in Dorset. And the cliffs that you see in Broadchurch are a mile from my house. So that's my writing walk. When I've got problems, I go and walk along those cliffs. And I was walking along there and thought somebody really should film something here because it's really brilliant. And then I thought, oh my God, that could be me. Really, and then felt stupid for not having thought of it 10 years earlier. James and I were working together. He was just shooting United, the Busby Babes film, or just finished shooting it actually. Yeah. It was being edited, and it was my sort of bastion of sanity, where it was like, it's possible to do good work. And so he came down and I talked to him about it, and we walked a bit and took some photos. And I wrote the script on spec and showed it to James, showed it to Sam, and we had a walk where I was going, well, we could show, if it's not shit, we could show it to people.
Right.
And it could be a show. Yeah. No, really. Given my experience the year before, it was completely in doubt.
How much did you explain to James about the idea, and how much of the idea at that point was fully formed, if you like? Was it? Did you want it to be a whoddunit? Did you want it to be a similar number of characters? Do you want the detective duo that we had?
I didn't know about a detective duo. I think I'd actually pitched after The Great Born and Bred, as you so kindly called it,
absolutely,
which was a Sunday night show. I actually wanted to. I had this sort of vague idea for something like Broadchurch. I actually was in Kudos pitching, and I pitched it to Faith Penhale and Claire Parker. Not this, 10 years previously. No, but they were like, yeah, that's great, but we've got this show called Life on Mars, would you like to do an episode of that? And that was fine. But it had always been sitting in my ideas document, and so I had that idea, and I knew I wanted it to be a big ensemble piece. I knew I wanted it to be a whodunit, because I love whodunit. So there was probably that, I think, and Jane would probably know some of this better than me, because there was stuff in there that in the sort of early spec version that then came up much further. Like Hardy wasn't anywhere near as central in my memory of it, and so it was a kind of scrambling for the idea, but it wasn't nothing comes fully formed.
Sure.
Any writer who tells you it does is either a liar or a genius or both.
Yes.
So yeah.
Jake, what was your feeling about when you went to see Chris and he was explaining all this? What was your initial feeling?
I remember when we were doing, and we had lunch in somewhere in town, and we were talking about what wouldn't be great to do something else after United, and it was, and people said, oh, do you want to do another film and stuff, and Chris was going, yeah, I want to do another film, but it's just 8 hours long, and that was kind of brilliant, because then it was the same ambition and the same vision of a film, but it was a TV series, and from that moment he said, I've got this thing, and I'm going to send it to you, and you're going to read it and see what you think, and obviously the second you read it, you're like, oh wow, this is great, but the real thing was then going down to Dorset and walking along with Chris, and we went all on the cliffs and up through the countryside and all the amazing landscape, and it then suddenly was like, this is kind of really different, because you don't see this part of the country actually on television very much, and the whole premise, the whole thing was, this is a terrible event happening in a beautiful place, and that kind of was the phrase that kind of imbued a lot of what we did, and so yeah, it was very exciting, and you just thought, oh, well, no one will ever want to buy this though, but then it was such a great script that, you kind of thought, well, they will, so yeah.
And actually on that, I remember on one of those walks, we were saying, where would you take it? What would you do with it? And I was like, well, nobody's going to do, I think it was 13 or 10 or something at that point, and I said, nobody's going to do that, so maybe we could try Sky Atlantic, and then we were just talking, but of course the brilliant thing would be is if you could get it onto ITV, because and then everybody would be talking about it, and that was literally the pipe dream that we looked at each other and went, you're just an idiot for even thinking that this would that would happen.
Why ITV and not BBC?
Because, well, I think it's a really good question. Instinctively and honestly, I think there's nothing like an ITV hit. Okay. An ITV hit transcends in a way that I think is different. And I think maybe it hits a broader demographic. I don't know. I'm just talking sort of, those really huge ITV shows smash down into the consciousness. I'm not saying BBC shows don't, but it's I don't know. I think there's more street-level conversation, perhaps. It's completely unscientific. That it's just an instinct. Because I suppose what we were talking about was Cracker and Prime Suspect and things like that. Going, look, that's the show we want to make. And we talked about that all through the process. We said it has to be. We're aiming to do something of a level of those extraordinary ITV crime dramas of the past.
And at what point did you get involved then, Jen? How did you?
So I got a phone call. A slightly parallel world, probably. I got a phone call from Laura Mackie, and Chris and I had done.
Someone's arrived.
Oh, Brad Pitt's arrived.
Come on. Olivia Colman, welcome. Hello.
Of all the rooms you can't sneak into, this is the one.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Thank you very much. Oh, please.
Sorry, I'm scruffy.
We haven't covered it all, so no. So we're just at the point where Jane's coming into the process of the creation of Broadchurch, just to keep you informed.
Yeah,
Jane,
Not me.
have a drink.
Everyone was so worried. It was just us, Olivia. There was a spare seat. Everyone was like, we came to see Olivia. Where the fuck's she? I'm leaving. I've got to get out of this room quickly. Anyway, she's here. So I got a phone call from Laura Mackie. Chris and I had done Law and Order together and had a great time doing that. And we worked on Life on Mars as well. And we had been parallel to Broadchurch developing a 10-part series, much as Chris had thought, I wonder if ITV would ever do a 10-part series. We had, about 18 months previously, pitched them, having seen The Killing. We thought, well, maybe we could do why can't we do a 10-part series? Peter Fincham said, all right, let's develop develop a 10-part series then, a long-form drama. We had a brilliant writer, who I'm not going to name now, because for whatever reason, he got very, 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 very busy. I couldn't do it, so this project stagnated and never got written. She rang me and said, Chris Chibnall's just sent me this brilliant project. It's a big project, and it's that sort of 8 or 10-part thing. Would you be interested in taking a look at it? Because we think, the 10-part ambition, and you and Chris, and have a look. So I got this amazing script already with huge heart. And what for me I loved so much about the first draft I read, Chris had been through this traumatic experience on Camelot, but he had built up an incredible craft over the years of writing Law and Order and Doctor Who and amazing shows, the brilliant Born and Bred. But when you combine that craft that he'd spent many years honing with an authorship that came from finding a true story in response to an experience, but in his hometown, suddenly on the page was, there was things to do, but there was this extraordinary voice, and it captured a moment in his writing history, I think, in his career. So I thought, So I rang Chris within half an hour and said, yes, please. And then we worked on it a bit, but it was a special moment. So that's how we got involved.
And in terms of the casting, at what point did you have in mind Olivia Colman?
Oh, right from the start. So I've told you this before. No, and it's actually true. I've told you this, haven't I? That actually when we did, so myself and Sam, who Olivia knows, were in my back garden, and it's not a lie. We wrote, it was the first character I wrote out. It's like Ellie, it's like Olivia Colman, but we'd never get her. And then I wrote the script, and the whiteboard got, turned round, and I wrote on the other side. And then months later, we were talking about casting, and Jane was like, I see it as someone like Olivia Colman. And
I said it could only be Olivia
absolutely brilliant. And then I went home and 2 days later turned around the whiteboard again, and there was your name. It was literally the first
like a magic trick.
Yeah, and then we had the biggest panic ever, which was like, how are we going to get her? She's never going to do it. Then we started the charm offensive.
And what did you think, Olivia? When you got sent the script, what was your initial response? What was your feeling?
Be careful.
I was thrilled they'd thought of me. I've said this lots of times, and it's true, but you get lots of scripts through, which are great, but every now and then you get one which you just can't put down. You can't, you're turning the pages frantically, and it was just like that. And I wanted to play it. I wanted to do all those emotions, and I wanted to know where it went. And I straight away went, yes, please.
We had a nice cup of tea, didn't we?
We
had a cup of tea, and actually Jane and I were so excited about meeting Olivia that as she walked in, we both went like this. So we were just like, we've just waved at Olivia Colman. We don't even know her. That's really embarrassing.
And then we all cried.
You cried?
We all cried. We all cried.
We did, we all had a cry.
What, there and then, over tea?
Olivia and I had a cry. I think Chris perhaps didn't cry, but we cried over tea. Do you not remember? Because we
With happiness that...
No, about the sadness of
Oh,
the
I
guy dying in the
Oh,
street.
okay.
And then we got really teary. We started crying in public.
And it was quite a cool place to have a cup of tea, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Where did you go?
Where was it?
Bit
The Ivy
embarrassing.
Club.
The Ivy
Oh.
Club. Yeah,
The Ivy Club.
really. I'd never been there before.
Yeah, and we cried.
Yeah.
Not just some cafe around the corner. The Ivy Club, that's
The
nice.
Ivy Cafe.
We've got some clips to show to hopefully illustrate how the whole show came together. And the first one we've got is called Initial Mood Board.
Oh, yeah.
Before we see it, we explain what kind of thing this is.
So this is the thing that James and I went on this walk, and we both took photos. Yeah. And my big thing when we took the script to ITV was I wanted them to feel it and see it as well as just read the script. So we'd taken some photos, and I put them into iTunes, and I put a track from the Social Network, the very first track from the Social Network, over it, and just went, this is what it should feel like. And this is it.
Let's have a look.
good.
Very good.
That's iTunes for you.
That's great, isn't it? So, do you ever think, oh, if I hadn't have done this thing, which is quite an unusual thing to do, isn't it, for when you're getting a string set up? Maybe it would, it was like you took the decision to do this thing on your own, using iTunes, using the technology, and getting it over the atmosphere, which it does brilliantly, of that place.
Yeah, I can't remember who watched it.
Okay.
Didn't, to be honest. I think the main thing is always a script. I think what it did was I just really wanted to go in confident and just go, we've got a script, we've got this mood board, we've got a director, we've got a set of storylines. I just wanted to go in with a fully formed thing to ITV. And actually, before it went to Jane, I'd rung Laura Mackie, us having had the conversation, going, well, let's just chance it with Laura and see if we could get it onto ITV. And did this big pitch, had this big pitch ready, and rang her and said, so it's this thing, it's 8 parts, or it's probably 20,000 parts. I think I said it's 13 parts, and it should be this. And she went, straight on the second sentence, she just went, yes, I think our audience is probably ready for one of those. And she would just send it. And she read it. And the thing I said to her was, can you read it quickly? Because I would just love to know really quickly, and then because if you don't want it, I'll take it somewhere else. And she read it over a weekend and rang back and went, yeah, we're really interested. Can we pay her the kudos? It was really fast.
Joe, do you remember seeing that? Did you see that?
Yeah.
And do you remember, does that helping you formulate the visual style of the show?
I mean, like Chris said, we took those photos on, a lot of those photos on that wall. Yeah.
That very first photo of barbed wire James took with my camera, and it was just, the whole show is in that shot.
Right.
We use that image throughout the process
Yes.
as a constant reminder
And
of what it should be.
The sort of the beauty and the horror in the one image, and that was the whole visual kind of grammar, if you like, in that one shot. And so it was often, weirdly, in TV drama development stuff, the visual language and stuff, ironically, isn't talked about much, or certainly isn't illustrated. And we wanted to do it from the start because it was so kind of important to convey how the show would feel and look and what it was like and this landscape and stuff and how that would be portrayed and stuff. So it was really important to kind of get that in front of people kind of early to sort of say this is what it's about.
And it also kind of shows, because I think the series is kind of partly all about community, isn't it, and a place, as well as the thing. And that mood board showed that so brilliantly, didn't it? Olivia, when, in terms of your character, and
Don't look worried.
It's all right. I mean, the thing that struck me when I first watched it, I remember thinking was your character particularly is like a normal person who happens to be working in a police station, happens to be a detective. Particularly that first scene when you go in and you give everyone the presents and all of that. What was your sense of the character, and what were you thinking about when you were doing
Well, it was all there, and it was all written. Chris had made her a whole person, so my job was very easy. And I loved the fact that she was a part of the community and a loving wife and mother and loved her job. It just meant what she saw on the beach that day would make it so much more upsetting that she knew everybody, she knew what would happen. And I wanted to play that. You don't often get to do that. And to play normal and nice and massive amounts of drama, really, from my point of view, my shallow point of view, really fun to play.
That's not shallow.
So did the rest of the cast kind of get slowly filled in around Olivia? Does that seem to be how it worked?
Yeah, I mean, we always had David in mind as well, didn't we? From
very early on. Yeah.
From very early on as well. So I think it, and as Chris said, Chris's development of that duo happened as the casting happened. You were still writing the scripts, and you sort of develop that organically and in a way, and you can see, I think some of the clips you've got as the performance between you two is sort of extraordinary, and that dynamic was unbelievable. And then, and I think, again, this is part of Chris's vision for it, part of the casting, and we all had lots of conversations about this early on, was trying to people it with surprising cast, all of whom could have their own show in some way, really interesting people, and that's what we ended up with, this extraordinary range, I think.
And was it hard for you to find? Was it hard for you to find the right people for the because as you say, it was unusual. Pauline Quirk is an unusual choice. It struck me.
I wrote that for Pauline.
Did you?
Actually, I wrote it for and all along I kept saying, I think it's Pauline Quirk, and she has nothing to say in the first episode, and she came in and read for it, and just
She didn't read, she just
With a
stood
script
there.
like that, you'll get anyone you want.
Really, is that?
Actors are desperate to say really good things. It's a no-brainer. I'm not surprised if
we had a process. No, when we had a process where we would offer it, and we got pretty much everyone who was our first choice, which doesn't normally happen. And we just used to ring each other up and go, "Can you believe they've said yes? Can you believe we've got Olivia and David and Andy and Jodie?" And there was a certain point, like Andy Buchan self-tape, so he did a thing at home or wherever he was in the world, sent us in this, emailed in his audition.
Just amazing.
We were just ringing each other up in tears. I remember you going, "Watch Andy Buchan's reel now," and I've never felt so lucky. But yes, Pauline came in and read and said, "I don't think it's breaking any confidence." It's like she said.
Well, it was only that one scene we had from episode 2.
Yeah.
It was still only about 3 lines.
Yeah.
It was like, "Where's the keys?" Don't know.
She came in without any makeup, and she really just said, well, "What was it she said to you?"
She said she'd rather be in a small part in something good than a big part in something shit.
Really,
Fair enough. We're going to see now something called camera tests, which I guess will include some visual kind of themes and also some shots, early shots of the actors. Is this kind of rehearsed?
Yeah, this is James.
Like watching you.
Like watching what?
This is showing your workings.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is kind of our chance to experiment, if you like, and just because often you get on, you don't do a camera test. So the first time you kind of put your amazing visual grammar test is on the first day when everyone's going, watching all the rushes going, "What are you doing?" And it's all like, "Ah." So this was a great opportunity to actually have a camera and with a DOP and have two kind of actors for the day in the actual location that became the Latimer's house. And I just wanted to try and demonstrate the kind of way we were going to shoot it and the feel of it. And we experimented but have a watch and see if you think any of it.
Let's have a look.
If it made it in.
Very interesting.
Yeah, a bit slower than we ended up with. But the whole sort of composition and the way that we just kind of let it.
Well, you learn a lot from those, don't you? Because actually what we learned about the way you were shooting insides and outsides and connecting the two, but also even you look at the way that's graded compared to how we graded the end show, which is much warmer and a bit more golden and but
that's got quite chilly looking.
It was raining though.
Oh, okay.
It was raining mostly when we shot the film.
But we went for exactly. It was interesting. We kind of the camera style didn't change, but actually the palette changed, and we watched that and actually we made it. We repainted the house to make it a little bit lighter, a little bit warmer, and
And set dressing was warm, and we also took that into ITV as well and showed them that and the whole set of it. And actually, the thing that happened on the show, the process was we just talked a lot openly all the time and continually we had big tone meetings where we set everything, just kept going. It's what James said, a terrible thing in a beautiful place. You know?
I think it's really rare, I have to say. I mean, having worked on lots of series, which some of them end up good, some not so good. But what was extraordinary about this was the length of time that the detail was discussed and analysed, and that's a gift to have that amount of time. The amount of prep time that James had to do that and to really think about that stuff is so rare, and the results aren't an accident in that way. And I think that's.
So how does that work? Do you go to ITV and say, right, we need this amount of time to prepare? Do you have a long rehearsal time?
It was before that.
It was before that.
Okay.
I think in a way, exactly. It's because in sort of early prep, and because James had been on right from the beginning with Chris, and Chris had a very clear vision of it, and then Rich, the producer, came on, and Joel, who's our location manager here, came on very early and did a brilliant job. And there was a lot of just a genuine examination of the craft. And most of the time, each of the departments, in my experience, do their thing and talk a little bit. And everyone was talking together in a very open way, and that's so rare. And the other thing I think is the music, which you may come on to, but that even those bits you've just seen, they work fundamentally because of the music, even though there's nothing going on in those sequences, and that's also critical to it.
Well, yeah, because we also sent back playlists back and forth.
Exactly.
There was 40 songs going back between us, and we
always past the way you conceived it.
And I think that's the thing. I mean, James was just there as part of the development as we were writing, because actually the time frame for making the show and delivering the show was incredibly tight. But actually, we've been talking about it for a while and just going back and forth. And then we would just made sure that, all those heads of departments were just signed up. It's something I think I learned from Russell T Davies, working with him, is you have a simple vision, and then you just keep everything going to that vision, and then you let the brilliant people do it.
So, at what point, how long did it take? Did you have all 8 episodes finished when you started shooting?
No. I knew what was going to happen though.
Right.
When we started shooting, we maybe had 3 or 4 written. No, I mean episode 8.
Came very late.
How late, Olivia?
Quite frantic line learning.
I wish I hadn't turned to you at that. Yeah, it did. I mean, it came after we'd started shooting the final block.
Oh, because you nearly told us as well.
Oh, well, yes.
A few weeks before.
Yes.
That was mean.
So you filmed almost a lot without telling the cast who had done it.
Yeah. No. People didn't know. So I'm assuming everybody in here knows. And if you
Spoiler
don't know,
alert.
that's just leave.
It's not too late.
It's been on a while.
Yeah.
So Matthew, who plays Joe, didn't know until the night before episode 8 script was sent out. I rang him, and it was like being Andrew Lloyd Webber and going, "It's you, Dorothy." He got very confused when I said that. No, I rang him and said, "It's you," and there was just a big long pause, and then he went, "Brilliant." There's that moment of confusion where he was thinking, "Oh wait," and then he was just thinking, "Oh, I'm going to get loads of scenes."
And similarly, an effect on you. It was your husband. So I mean, you must. I mean, your scenes were perhaps even more extraordinary post discovering who did it.
Yeah, well, it was a bit. Oh God!
Was it?
Him and but also great. Similarly to him, it's going to be some meat now. It's all terribly upsetting, but I mean, from a performance point of view, it's really fun to do that stuff. So, and just also incredibly upsetting because we'd all been together, and you talking about the heads of department all being involved, and everyone felt their worth. They felt part of something because this team always made them feel part of it, and that you were valuable. So we'd all become so close, and we all really supported each other, and we had bets as well on who was it.
Oh, did you?
And
And the makeup truck.
I got one sticker under my name. I was so pleased. So when it came to it, I was upset because it was my husband who was so nice and so lovely. But it helped. It all helped.
So you didn't guess. You didn't.
Oh, I think there was a point where you sort of couldn't help but guess. Yeah. But then it became less whodunit. and more why
Right.
and how. But it helped everyone's performance, I think.
Absolutely.
It actually went, I have to say,
Go on.
the final, the thing, one of the scenes with Olivia actually went back to our very first meeting when you met us and you went, I've got 2 questions. Do we catch them and can I kick them in the balls? You did. You totally said that. And I said yes and yes. And I thought, well, I've got to put that scene in where she really kicks them in the balls.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I did really want to.
When you were starting filming and you're underway and episodes were you're looking at rushes and all that. At what point? I mean, now it feels to everyone who watched the show and I'm sure ITV, everyone involved knows how brilliant it was. But at what point, when you're making it, do you think this is a bit special? This is something special, or do you know from the start?
About 9:30 on the first day.
On the first day.
No, I'm joking. I don't know.
Yes, he is.
I don't think you ever. I don't think you ever can know. I mean, we knew we were doing good work.
Yeah.
And we were enjoying it, which was probably good as well. But you have a feeling, and you think, but you hope it's good, and you hope that everyone's going to like it. But
you can't have that feeling when you're doing it.
no.
You don't know. You just don't know.
You just
Truly, you don't know.
Okay.
Because I've done things before that I feel terribly passionate about, and I think are really good, but people haven't watched it.
Yeah.
I haven't, but the fact that everybody really took this to their heart was great. But I think in the process of it, you can't try and be aware of what you're doing. Just do it well.
Yeah.
Or it goes wrong.
We've picked out some of our favourite clips, which we're going to show soon. We've got some of those coming up. But I rewatched the first episode again, and that opening, the incredible tracking shot, famously, where you're following and you meet kind of most of the suspects, don't you?
Yeah.
At what point does that kind of thing arrive? As right, let's do it this way. Let's make this incredibly cinematic, exciting kind of thing that directors love to do, I guess, but you might not have the chance to do.
They're quite tough. Well, I can't remember.
That came in very early.
Yeah.
That was
Did
one
it?
of our walking on
Yeah.
the cliffs moment, and it was certainly we talked about it a lot, and we were talking like you do when you're not having to do anything practically. You go, it should be like that first shot in Touch of Evil. Where he follows it, and he does the thing with the bomb and the borders, and then you have to do it on a budget.
Yeah.
But there was a version of that in most scripts to my memory, of some kind of really long Steadicam thing, and then I think the thing of having all the suspects in actually came quite late.
Okay.
Which I was really nervous about.
Were you? Why?
Yeah. I remember. You remember?
Well, I remember after
We
we
did
did
it.
through, there was a moment where was there like a.
Do you think it might be a bit contrived?
Do you know what?
Is it gonna-
There was a version of it that was contrived, and it was just like, oh God, is this just going to be a bit eggy where you kind of go around all the suspects? Is that going to work? And is that just going to feel a bit odd? But James convinced me, and he was right, that he could make it work.
It was take 10.
Yeah. On the day I wasn't quite so
And we've
confident.
had one.
Yeah, we were like, you got the morning.
And how long did that take to film?
I think we did 16 takes of it.
Yeah.
Something like that. And because it's all about a sunny day, and there was the sun was coming in and out, and that's a real high street that we kind of every time we had to go through, we had to stop, and half the takes people was walking through the middle of it, and it was
Cars going,
chaotic.
move out of
I think it's take 8.
Oh, okay.
So we kind of got it, and then you're like, one for luck. And you're like,
Yeah.
one for luck. It's like, this is huge. But yeah, it was a big old thing to choreograph it, and it took.
There's a brilliant thing on the rushes, which you'll never see, which is at the end of whatever it was, the first take where it all went through. So obviously you're following Andy Buchan all the way through it, and he gets into the van at the end, and as they drove off, you just hear him going, "Come on!"
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
What we're going to look at now, I think, is the teaser trailer. So this is the very first trailer that was made for the show. Let's have a look.
Danny, can you give me a call straight away, sweetheart? I just want to know where you are. I haven't seen him since yesterday.
She's closed off. Police are at the beach.
The body of an 11-year-old child.
Why would a benevolent God allow this to happen?
Something doesn't make me vulnerable.
Everybody knows now,
Someone
doesn't
tries to make it look like it is.
There's no way for a child to end his life.
Other kids are in danger.
These people's lives have been destroyed.
We will find the person responsible. You have my word.
I don't know if we even showed that.
No,
to
that
them.
never
It was
went.
just one of those things we were talking about, wasn't it? And just
That never went anywhere.
Oh, really?
Why?
So at what point did you make that?
That was in the because we shot the first block, and then when that was during the editing of the first block, before I came back and did the end, and so we were
Did we do that, or did you do that?
Yeah, we did that. So,
I don't remember that at all.
yeah, we sort of were trying to think of different ways of sort of teasing what we're doing.
In terms of once the film was under, or once you were kind of the cast was together, how long did you spend rehearsing and getting it all of that? Was it kind of a unusually long period, or just a
We
normal?
did a couple of days rehearsing.
rehearsal,
We just sort of
family.
met and had a chat. Annoyingly, so it's the first time we'd all met, and it's a rehearsal, so I was kind of like this, and no makeup on, and James said, can we have a quick picture so I can imagine the family together? And that was the one in the back of shot.
That's right.
We were like that.
Sorry.
Really annoying.
With the young actor hard to find. I mean, he was phenomenal.
Adam.
Your son, yeah.
It did take us a long time to find him, actually, didn't it? Victor and Kelly, who cast it, they really saw so many people. They did a great job with both him and Oscar, who played Danny, who was also extraordinary. We saw a lot of kids.
And did you, if you're playing the mother of a young boy, what's that like? Do you have to be motherly? Do you have to kind of bond in that way with the or do you just do it? No.
I was trying not to swear.
Or get him drunk.
Or get him drunk. No, he's a lovely boy, and his mummy was always there, and and he was brilliant with grown-ups, wasn't he?
So
I didn't
confident.
really, it was just comfortable. We got on like friends, which was right, I think, for the thing. And he didn't come out drinking with us, obviously. It was very easy. He was a very nice boy to have around, so it was automatically, if you felt a little bit mumsy, sort of cuddles.
So from the sound of it, the rest of the adult cast did go out drinking and kind of bonded in a way. Is that fair to say?
Sometimes James made us.
Discuss the script.
Sometimes, though, after like a day on the beach, you go, let's all have a gin. And it was nice. We were all staying near each other, and a couple of drinks afterwards. Nice, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting because obviously, certainly the first episode is incredibly intense. But do you manage to have what kind of atmosphere did you want?
It was the weird thing that we were doing some of the most difficult and kind of harrowing material I've ever done, and sometimes you're feeling like, I'm not even sure we should be filming this because it's so horrible. And then sort of 5 minutes later, everyone's like, having a laugh at the front. But I think there was that kind of release that was needed, and you did have to go and have a drink at the end, and everyone was so kind of and heightened, I suppose, into it.
And in terms of getting the cast and crew together, I've read the phrase that you had a no wankers policy.
That was no wankers allowed.
I mean, obviously, presumably when you're making TV, you don't want wankers generally, but particularly, what did that mean in terms of this?
It does mean everything. Yeah. It really does, and it's just sometimes you look at brilliant crew or cast, or sometimes, and you think they said they're really brilliant, they're a bit difficult, but they're really great, and you're thinking, we don't want people who are a bit difficult but really great. We want people who are just really great and really nice. So that's what we ended up with.
Because the process is
It's
your
hard
life.
enough.
Is your day-to-day job. So you think, well, why would we work with people who are going to be difficult or miserable, or you try, and also there are great people who are lovely. Yeah. So it was a really strong policy, genuinely.
Right.
And there's some of the really difficult stuff as well. If you don't feel like you trust everybody, you can't do it. You can't do the work. So your policy worked very well because we all felt we were all supporting each other.
Great. For some reason, I've been able to choose my favourite moment. So we'll have a look and I'll explain why, and then we can talk about it. Let's have a look.
Request for backup at Sea Brigade Hall. All right, lads. Let's not be daft here. We're here to sort the Jack. There's no meeting here tonight. No boys are coming here, Jack. We don't want you near our kids. We don't feel safe with that.
You don't have kids, Nigel. You didn't even get a badge for not.
Yeah? Well, I can speak for those that do. Not really, Nigel. All right, boys. Criminal. Mate, get away. Come on. Get back. You don't need to be involved. We're doing this for you. Get back.
The reason I chose that is because I think it shows how it wasn't just a whodunit. It wasn't just a crime thriller. It had this incredible other stuff going on. And one of the brilliant things that was going was that story, David Bradley character's story. which of course there's a real life case, isn't there? Just I think it's all, of a man, an innocent man who was accused of being a paedophile and was murdered.
Yes, it's in the news today.
In the news today. So I partly want to be because it just, for me, it shows all the kind of different levels the show is working at, and how brilliant is David Bradley. He's such a brilliant. So my questions are: A, did you always have him in mind for that role? And B, was layering, having kind of different issues like that, almost issues, a strong word, part of the whole idea? Okay.
I think the number one, David Bradley. No, that character was 20 years younger in the script, and David. I was one of the few auditions I sat in on, and David came in, and I'd worked with him on Doctor Who, and before he came in, I was like, I don't think he's right for this. He's much older than I imagined. He came in, read it, and it was just like, you got it. Yeah, I'm wrong. Happened with Will Mellor as well. Actually, Will's character was 20 years older in the script. Will came in, and I think that changed his suggestion and just did the most extraordinary thing with it. So, no, David, I mean, he's just the most wonderful man and beautiful actor, and he's extraordinary. I can't say enough wonderful things about him. And then the layering of it was absolutely prompted really strongly by ITV, by Peter Fincham, by Laura Mackie and Sally Haynes, just saying, it has to be bold, it has to be authored. They kept saying to us, it's not, don't worry about whether you're going to get ratings, make it really strong and opinionated. It was completely, they were a dream to work with, and they wanted something that had something to say. And for me, episode 5 which is what that's from, with the media storm and the press and the end, that's the point of Broadchurch. That's the whole centre of it, and it's right in the middle. And so I'm delighted you've chosen, particularly as a journalist.
Yes.
I'm delighted that you've chosen that clip because it's absolutely sensible.
And you do get journalists, don't you? Saying you did get journalists. I'm sure when you first were saying, it's not exactly like that in a newspaper and all that kind of thing. Did you even care? Did you does that kind of thing?
Well, actually, I mean, the local newspaper. A lot of people told me that those papers don't exist, and there's one on my high street.
Oh, okay.
And I get interviewed by it quite often, and we went and did the research, and a lot of journalists told me this newspaper didn't exist, and I get the paper every week, and I've been in those offices, so they were wrong.
Yes.
National newspaper, I suspect, slightly off because of finances, but no, and also it's not a show about journalism, it's a show about the effect of who owns the narrative. We talked about this a lot, didn't we, Jane? Who owns the narrative in a murder case?
But it was researched, Chris, even though it is completely fictional, it is researched, and to a large degree in all of the things. So, and I think the greatest fiction works when it takes the facts and then turns them into fiction, and sometimes you ignore them, and sometimes you have to throw things away that are factually accurate. But fundamentally, this piece had underneath it all fact, and it was true. The way you approached all the stories, it was real.
And yes, and actually, you've just reminded me, because we talked to a lot of journalists, sort of national journalists who so that they would remain anonymous. I talked to a very senior broadsheet crime reporter who'd done the Christopher Jeffries case, and I said, okay, off the record, why did you all go for him? What was it about him? What evidence did you have that was not in the public domain as a pack, and because you all did it? And he just went, he just looked a bit dodgy, didn't he? And at that point, I just thought, I've got the story.
So was the Chris Jeffries case in your mind particularly?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely very clearly that.
Yeah.
So I know I talked to a lot of people, and I was shocked and delighted.
Let's have a look at another favourite moment. This is your, Chris. This is your favourite moment. We'll have a look first, and then we'll discuss it afterwards.
Miller. Reconstruction, Thursday night, 1 week on. Your boy Tom, you should do it.
What? No, I don't want him to.
No, he's the best choice.
Did you not hear what I just said? He's just lost his best friend that could traumatise him for life.
Well, maybe he should be allowed to decide.
No, I'm his mum. I decide.
Oh, so your commitment to this investigation stops outside these doors?
With respect, sir, move away from me now, or I will piss in a cup and throw it at you.
Talk to... What's your husband's name? Joe. Talk to him about it. And Tom.
You're invited for dinner.
What?
Pick a night.
At your house? Why?
Do you know many people here? Are you living off hotel food?
It's not a good idea.
Oh, please don't be an arsehole about it. Believe me, I don't really want to do it either, but it's what people do.
Is it?
Yes, they have their bosses round. We don't have to talk about work.
What are we talking about?
I don't know. Just say yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bloody hell.
So,
Do I need to explain that?
yeah, well, did you choose that clip because it's really funny? Because amidst all the misery, of Broadchurch, there is humour, isn't there? I mean,
I didn't choose it because of that.
Okay.
But it's sort of a side reason of that, which is, it was the point when I was watching the rushes at home, and I'd watch them every day, and I was really delighted with them all along. And that bit, I just watched them, and I went, oh my God, we've really got a show here. And it was really because of you and David. And I was watching, because you watch it on obviously the angles first. So you see that angle, you see the whole thing of that, then you see this angle. And it was the first one I just thought, I don't know how we edit that scene together because they're both extraordinary. And it was the point where you and David had just become, just the respect and the playfulness between you two suddenly sort of came out in that scene. And it had been there all along, but I really thought, oh my God, we can go anywhere now. And I really felt that. It was a real proper thrill of, oh, look at these two, they're amazing. And yeah, and yes. And then, because also I think I saw that, and then I was still writing the next episode, so I was still thinking, oh my God, I can't wait to get to the dinner scene now. So that's the most exciting time as a writer when you're watching the rushes, and it's 20 times. It's not that funny a scene, really isn't. It's really funny the way Olivia and David do it. That's the thing. It's genius.
right. And does that, and for you, acting in that scene, did you realise, oh, this is a great scene?
I loved all those scenes where David was just... it's just a joy. Knowing that I can't wait to see him do that in a really surly way. Every moment with David was just brilliant. Very hard to stop giggling quite a lot of the time.
Oh, really?
Bad at that.
Well, and you also, at the end of that scene, when the angle is on you at the end, you do a different insult on the rushes every
time.
take.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh my God, yes.
What were the other insults?
Oh, you don't want to know.
Oh, we do.
They were so filthy. That was about the only one we could use.
We had the crew going...
It was, yeah.
Just one of them. One of the alternate insults.
No, there was
No?
like...
Oh, they're all
there
beyond.
was like
I can't...
10.
Oh, okay.
There was like...
They were quite shocking.
Okay.
It's really not...
Well, I made a load of sparks go, oh. It's quite fun. Then you get to endear yourself to the crew.
Yeah. That relationship between the two detectives, how different did that develop from when you first came up with the story and you first writing it to how it ended up when you were, as you say, busy writing scripts and you're about to write the dinner scene you've just seen? Did it evolve? Did it develop? Did it change a lot?
Yeah, I think it probably became funnier. I mean, the note you always get on these things quite rightly is, if you can find any jokes, that would be great. If there could be any humour in it, and you're always going, oh, I don't know. It's mainly about people weeping. And so really then when you start to see the rushes, you go, oh, okay, I get it. We can do it like that. And so that was part of it. I mean,
I've got a theory. I've got a theory about it as well, which is I think Chris naturally writes it into his... I think Chris writes real characters, real people, and real people mostly talk with some wit and humour and try and find humour in dark moments. But also in the casting, I think we ended up choosing, if you look at that cast, a lot of those actors have worked in comedy and in drama. And many, I mean, Olivia, clearly, David Bradley, Andy, a lot of those actors, Pauline, have done both, Will, and I think that ended up meaning that you were able to write, as the series went on, they found the comedy in the dialogue. And so that became part of the fabric of it as it developed. I really think it did. With a different cast, we may not have had the same results.
I think that's true.
I'm going to do a massive name drop now, but I did an event with Emma Thompson last week. And she, but she said one of the things she kept saying was that one of the differences between British drama and British acting and American is finding the humour in everything. She said if there isn't humour, she doesn't care how serious it is, then she doesn't give a damn about it. And all the great actors. She said all the great actors, British actors, are comedians.
Judi Dench, all the great actors are comedians as well. Yeah. I think that's a hugely important part of this.
You need it as a breather, don't you, after all those crime scenes? It also heightens each thing.
Yeah.
I'm not terribly eloquent.
No, that's exactly right. No, it is.
Absolutely. We've got James's favourite moment now.
Is it the Steadicam shot?
It's from episode 1. Let's have a look. It's not.
No, it's not.
I'm Detective Inspector Alec Hardy. I think you know D.S. Miller. Why don't you take a seat? We just need to talk about something.
Yeah. Sit down now.
Get a chair.
Get the... Don't worry, I can do it.
The body of a young boy was found
It's
on the
Danny,
beach.
isn't it?
Let him finish.
I saw his shoes.
Plenty of kids have those shoes. Sorry, you talk.
We believe it's Danny's body.
Was it him?
Hey. It's all right. Hey. Hey.
Yeah, favourite's probably
Right.
the wrong word
Sure.
to use in connection with that.
But incredibly powerful.
But I think why I chose it was because I think we never forgot our responsibility when we were making it to portray as truthful a response to this event as possible, and I think that's where this show kind of also differed between other shows in that there's a murder, there's a crime, and the policeman tells the family, okay, we'll catch the killer, and then they leave the family behind. In this show, we stayed with the family the whole way through, and it was all about that and the emotional impact of this crime, as much as finding out who did it, and also that scene, the way we shot it, that foreshot of the family is the first take that we did with them, and that we kept the family and Olivia and David apart that morning, and we didn't let them in the house. So all that stuff with the chair and stuff, that was all improvised. I feel that was all kind of real, because I wanted it to be as real as possible.
Because I guess it's hard to, that scene of breaking the bad news to loved ones is a scene you've seen so many times before. Trying to find a different way of doing it.
And often the process of making television, the whole lights, cameras, and rehearsal and stuff was all important, and you've got to do it and stuff most of the time. But sometimes you just miss those instinctive little moments that just kind of that you can't plan. And we just tried to, for those sorts of bits, not to rehearse them, just to kind of do it and see what happens and stuff. That relies on amazing people to.
When you wrote that scene, was it hard to write a scene which I said, which is just such a part of crime drama, isn't it? That kind of moment.
Yeah, and I'd written it a lot in Law and Order UK, but often you would on other shows, and it was part of the impulse for writing the show was to do the scenes that you normally cut out, because you normally go for story and plot, and actually we talked about this a lot, and it sounds like we did it as a fait accompli from the start, but we discovered it. It's the emotion became the plot, and we always talked about it being, my big thing was, what would it feel like to live through a police procedural? How would it really feel? Because it didn't feel like that was being expressed in other dramas. So actually those scenes, in a funny way, are very straightforward. It's a bit like the scene in episode 8 where David's character tells you that it's Joe. It's actually an incredibly simple scene, but the way it's shot, again, James, and the way it's acted, those scenes take on a heft because you're giving it space, I suppose. We gave stuff space. But we found it as we went along. It's not like we came to it certain.
Were you there all the time on set when all this? No,
I don't really go. I go on set as little as possible.
Why is that?
Well, number one, there's no worse place to be as a writer than a set, because you've got nothing to do apart from if people want to change something. And then also you're probably responsible for everybody having to do really difficult things in really cold weather. And also
Food's rubbish.
No, the food's really good, but the food is for people who are doing physical work all day. It's not for writers. I'm going to have a lunch on set, and then I sit down and I'm like, I just have a nap. But actually mainly because I want to be able to watch the rushes not knowing that the light was going, not knowing that somebody was in a bad mood, not knowing that they couldn't quite... I want to be the first viewer.
Yeah,
so
that makes
that's
sense,
why I kind of stay away. Also, you've got somebody like James, you don't need to be on set because the rushes are great, genuinely. It's...
Finally,
and when they're not, I ring him.
Yeah. Finally, we've got Jane's favourite moment. We didn't get a favourite moment from you. Is that because you didn't have enough time, you couldn't think of one?
Nobody asked me.
No. Furious.
Olivia, you can share mine if you like.
Thank you.
Well, let's have, this is from episode 8. Let's have a
Okay,
look.
yes, I'm going to say. Is he a paedophile? Because he didn't do anything, and the pathologist said there was no record of abuse on Danny, either historic or recent. And I asked Tom, and he said Joe never touched him. So what does that make him?
Why do you need a category?
I need to understand.
Well, just because he didn't abuse either boy, it doesn't mean that he wouldn't have gone on to.
Doesn't mean he would have either.
No. We'll never be sure. Eve said he was in love. Maybe he was romanticizing to justify what he felt, or maybe that's as it was. I mean, I don't have these answers. I don't. People are unknowable. And you can never really know what goes on inside someone else's heart.
I should have seen it.
How?
A bloody detective. Miller, the brilliant cop, was lying next to the murderer.
Is that another kind of scene we don't see necessarily always?
Exactly. I love that scene for many, many reasons. As a favourite, like James, is not favourite in a sort of woohoo way, but I just think it's extraordinary because it's the full circle of the asking to dinner moment. You come to the end 8 hours later, and there's such a relationship between these two with this terrible thing that's now happened. And it's grey. That scene is so grey. And in most crime dramas, particularly at the end of 8 hours, you get a resolution, you get whodunit, but you don't really get the full why because you can never really know. And I think most crime dramas try to tie things up. And I've worked on many that have done that neatly. And this just leaves this great gaping, ambiguous hole in the middle of that. And I love also the way it's written and directed, that you have that wonderful, it's very dark, it's beautifully paced, and then Olivia comes in with something that's near a joke again. It just turns again at the end from something very painful to human and funny, and even in that dark moment, she's trying to find that humanity in it. I think it's a brilliant bit of writing and directing and acting. I love it.
What did you think of the end of the kind of resolution of the series for you? Were you when you got that last script, apart from finding out who did it?
Well, that scene, when I got the last script, I think quite a few of us phoned Chris, went, why? Why did he? And
that wasn't in there, was it? I don't think that scene wasn't in the first...
No, it wasn't. And maybe that came because so many people went, why?
No, it was, yeah. We didn't have the really explicit... I thought you were going to say that, actually, because it was actually, I think you and Laura Mackey were having a conversation and just going...
Yeah, without that, I really struggled.
We needed a wine
with well, if you're not a I thought I knew what a paedophile was, but he hasn't done any of those things, and I thought, I'm sure I'm not going to be alone with not understanding, and I wanted Ellie to ask why, and so I'm so thrilled when that scene arrived as well.
But we were on the phone, I think, and I was writing down all the questions, and the note came from it. Was literally, that's sort of the scene, and often it's very easy to write a script and not write the obvious scene. Very easy.
And it was just you're right. We did talk about suddenly needing that why, but the why, your human response to why, those questions are so human and real. I think that's
you do want to know, don't you?
And it is rare to have that kind of scene, especially quite a subtle point and a discussion of why someone might do something like that is an unusual.
Because that's a discussion you would all have.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's a good demonstration of how collaborative the show is. That it came from, I put the script out there, and sometimes you worry about putting scripts out there because you want them to be treated gently, because you want people to. And actually, what's great about that is, we had a conversation, you rang up, and Jane and I had a conversation, Laura Mackey gave some notes, and it's like, yeah, okay, I see that. And it's absolutely the centerpiece of the episode, really. It's that point where and of the series, it explains everything. And when I was writing it, I was like, oh yeah, of course, you idiot. How would you not write that scene? That was the thing. When you feel, that's what's working with great people and being collaborative is.
Sure. So I'm going to throw it open to you guys, so if you can give any questions soon. My final thing I'd like to ask all of you, because we should mention the fact that you made it and everything, and then ITV marketed it very, very powerfully.
Extraordinarily, really.
And seemed to really back it. Yeah. And at what point did you all really, I mean, it was a ratings hit pretty much overnight, 6.5 maybe, in the first show? 6.8. Thank you. But then also, got up to 8.5, 9 in the end.
I don't think that's consolidated, though, Jeff.
Consolidated. But also became an absolute kind of pop culture phenomenon. This is the thing that really separated out for me, is that it was being discussed in the papers. Yeah. The papers had spreads saying who did, asking who did it, all of that kind of thing. We did. Radio discussions, it was everywhere. Now that must have been a weird and unusual and amazing thing. At what point, James, did you realise this is all getting a bit?
I think it was towards the end, that last episode, when it was like front page of the Daily Mirror. I was just like, oh my God, this is mad. And I'm speaking to Chris going, yeah, but everyone's going, who is it? Who is the killer? Who's the killer? I'm like, but we tell them in the first 5-10 minutes, and it was all revealed by the first ad break. And because it's not about who, it's why and how. But
we were terrified, though.
Yeah.
I texted Jane at 10 tonight going, I think I've got it wrong. I think I've got the ending wrong.
Let's put it.
Why did none of us put a bet on it either?
Because I was warned very clearly that it would be against the law.
Who warned you that?
I think it was somebody at Kudos.
Oh, really?
We do things properly, I think.
Yeah. Well, at what point did you realise it become a massive phenomenon like that?
I probably existed in a state of disbelief for most of the run and still don't really believe it. I think there was 2 points. I think when we got the ratings for episode 3, and we went up 1 million between episode 2 and 3, and
which never happens.
Never happens. And then we got the consolidateds for week 1 or something, around the same point, or week 2, and we'd gone up 2 million on that, and so that was it. It was on like page 7 of the Mail on Sunday after episode 1 or 2 in the news section. It was basically saying, television show is on. And I was like, why is that? I don't understand that. While also thinking, episode 5 is going to be very interesting when the breast stuff comes out. Yeah. And then also my dad rang me and said, oh, we're talking about your show in the doctor's reception today. And I thought, oh my God. But I still don't really have any sense of it. It's like being at the eye of the storm. You just think, that can't be what happened.
And for Olivia, you being in it, did it feel that way to you, that this was, once it was out there and once that many number of people watching it and talking about it, did it feel extraordinary to you?
Yeah, yes, it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Just the sheer numbers of people who'd seen it. So, and I've said before in interviews, but I used to get train and bus everywhere, and for the patch when everyone was going really sort of frantically, who did it? I got cabs. I couldn't bear to look at anyone in case they knew, or in case they could see. And I was going to ruin it for everybody. But invariably, I'd get out of a mini cab and they'd go, sorry, who did it? Just sort of trying to hide. Because everybody wanted to know.
Although you did, when we went, there was a point where we all had a dinner together and in Primrose Hill, and you got a cab to that place, and we were all, there was Joe who plays Nige, and Matthew Gravel was there, and Andy Buchan and Jodie, and we were all sitting outside this pub probably the week before episode 8, and you got out the cab outside this pub and just went, ah, like next to everyone, and I just thought, there's like people inside the pub going, well, that's the Broadchurch lot.
Oh, I never think things through.
Like, out the cab, shouting.
I got excited.
And Jane, what was it like for you? I mean, you've been in charge of loads of hit shows, but there was something unusually special about this.
Really unusual, and I was about episode 3, I think, when the figures went up 1 million. I mean, that first night you think, oh, when the figures come in, and then people started talking, and I think the whodunit element was fascinating. But for me, and I may be wrong about this, but I think the whodunit was a sort of disguise that people used to be able to respond to the show the next day. They wanted to talk about it, but actually, ultimately, it was the emotional response to the show that people really loved, I think. I mean, I think, yes, you want to know, and it's that urge for the narrative conclusion, but really, I think you just loved that sitting at home watching it. And so as I began to talk to more people who watched it, and their emotional response was so committed, I thought, oh, hang on, we've really tapped into something. So.
Absolutely, because there are loads of whodunits.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it was the emotion in it, not just
everyone really kept the secret as well. I thought it was
Yes.
so nice. It was
Yes.
really true to their word.
And lots of
So
people
it
knew.
didn't spoil it for anybody. Yeah, lots of people did. Oh, yeah.
No, and the press were great, and it's
I loved
really
that.
true.
Yeah.
Press were great. You heard it here.
I never believed it. I really thought around episode 6 it was going to leak, and you're right. Nobody did.
No,
Nobody from the crew. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, which made it incredibly special.
Yeah, it did.
Right, now let's throw it open to the floor. There's a lady there. No, there's a mic on its way, and if you could say who you are and what you do, maybe, and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Jess. I do special effects makeup and then finance during the day, just in case you wanted to know that. Really amazing show and really gripped me the whole way through. And I just wanted to know, like, personally, did the show affect you in, particularly for Olivia, like playing the kind of wife of, everything, and obviously the mother of a son and everything. How did it affect you, and did you find that the emotional response was completely like? Did you find it that you questioned your own relationships because of it? If you know what I mean.
No. Well, it's the emotional moments are real at the time, absolutely, because you're watching other people and you're imagining and feeling it. And but the moment it stops, you know you're pretending, and we were all aware of that and very supportive of each other. And you wanted to do it justice for if anyone watched who had ever experienced anything like that. You didn't want to not do it well for them. But no, I love acting, but it's all I do. It's just pretending. It's nothing special about what I do. I put on other people's clothes. I say other people's words. I get driven there by somebody else. And I'm in touch with my emotions, but it's just pretending. So.
Thank you. Yeah, gentleman in the back. Towards the back. Thank you.
My name's Ross Biddiscombe. I'm a writer. Question for Chris. This balance between the whodunit scenes and the character scenes. My favourite scene was when Olivia revealed this. She was asked out by one of her colleagues, and she went into David's office and revealed this, and they had this 2-minute interchange, which was nothing to do with the whodunit, but it was a wonderful, wonderful scene. Are there scenes like that you had to leave out? I mean, how did you balance that kind of non-whodunit scene with a plot mover?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't think we left many of those out. To be honest, we left more plot ones out because actually it's exactly what Jane was saying. We gravitated towards the character. So in a funny way, there's lots of evidence and lots of procedural scenes and plot points you just don't see in the show. You just sort of assume that they've happened. But mostly when you and David are on screen together, you're talking about having chips and coffee and, so it's the bare minimum of procedure and as much character as you could get in as possible. I mean, it was just trial and error. I mean, you just didn't know. And every episode was different. Every episode had a different feel. With episode 4, when I was writing it, where we plotted it to, there was so much in it. So that was where, so at the end of episode 4 originally, that's when David Bradley's character died. We had to split that into 2 episodes because there was so much stuff going on, and I delivered the first draft and just all sat there and I just said, I'm going too fast, it needs to slow down. So it was really trial and error, but you hoped that the character stuff was what people were engaged with. And again, that is a direct result of seeing the episode 3 and seeing the dinner, and you just think, I could watch an hour of, you and David just sitting on a sofa and talking about photocopying, it's like... I'm not giving any spoilers. But,
Thank you. Yes, lady there.
So originally my question was going to be, did you know throughout the 8-part series that it was your husband that did commit the crime? But after you've answered that question, my question to you would be, after you obviously didn't tell the cast, did you frequently change your mind about who actually would be the murderer? And if so, who did you think you might change it to?
No. Interestingly, no, it was pretty solid, because I remember very vividly waking up one morning and going, oh, it's Joe. And then I came in the next day and to Jane and said, it's Joe. It has
And I
to
was
be."
like, oh,
Yeah.
he can't.
Yeah.
He's like,
That was when we had a show. So from then on, which was quite early, way before it was greenlit, from then on it never changed.
There's a gentleman just in front. There you go. Just there.
Hello, I'm an events producer, very retired. Thank you very much indeed, all of you, because it's been, fascinating, and it was a stunning show. Could I ask James a question about the visualization? Because plainly, you spent a lot of time at the very beginning defining how it should look. When you were mixing between fixed cameras or steady, literally steady cameras, and handheld, what was your reasoning? How did that work? Was it ever at times you had to do it practically handheld, to do it quickly or in a small space, or was it absolutely artistic?
We sort of talked about landscape and being an emotional landscape and a physical landscape. So in that camera test, you see the kind of the wide shots, if you like, that set the geography of the people within a room. So you see their physical relationships, and then the thought was that then for the emotional relationships, that you are actually intimate with them. So that therefore a handheld camera allows you to be physically as close as you can be to somebody without feeling that you're kind of interfering with them and stuff. So that was the kind of general thought behind it, that actually you saw these places and you saw these spaces properly, and you saw their relationships within them. But then the handheld camera was kind of there. And also the handheld camera, obviously, for the more kind of emotional stuff, and it allows the flexibility to react to. I didn't want to dictate to where people were going, so if the camera's fixed, and suddenly, oh God, they've got over there, so we can't go with them. So again, it just gave you that ever so slight bit of freedom that the cameraman could actually, the DOP, Matt Gray, who was amazing, could actually feel where the emotional focus of the scene was placed and stuff. So it was about freeing things up, really, to kind of allow kind of a flexibility and an honesty about it all.
Thank you. Let's go to this side. Yes, lady. There.
Hi, I'm Rami. I'm a television production undergrad. It's been compared a lot to The Killing, and obviously that's had multiple seasons now. At what point in the production did you think this can have a second season?
Way before we got into production, although I lied about that a lot. When we had actually, I'd had the idea. I told you about the idea, hadn't I? Way before we'd gone forward with it. And when we had the meeting with Peter Fincham at ITV, when he greenlit it, I said, and if it worked, we could do this afterwards. And it was a throwaway comment, and that was a year before it went out. And then after it went out, we started having more serious conversations. But it was the thing, that we talked about. So I always had a sense of what it is. I'm being very careful to say anything. Sorry.
Thank you. A couple more questions. Yeah, gentlemen, a few rows back towards the end. Mike's on its way.
Hi, I'm John. I'm just a keen viewer, really. I was interested in what Jane was saying there about what made you want to look. And for me, the landscape itself just made me want to keep watching it. Now, I was thinking about how you kept seeming to pull towards West Bay itself, and even the police station is obviously just where the harbour is. Was that logistical, or did you think, no, we want to keep it in West Bay? And then I was also thinking about Dorset, and of course Hardy Country's, it's 10 miles down the road. And was that part of the thought process of saying Dorset is itself the star, which is obviously a thing that everyone says about Hardy?
Yes, absolutely. Completely nicked from Thomas Hardy. And right at the start, we had these conversations. I mean, I knew, and that's why it's Wessex Police, that's why his name is Hardy, I mean, that's why David Bradley's character is reading Jude. Did I not mention it? Sorry. It's amazing the things you learn.
I'm really pleased I came.
So glad you asked that question as well.
So it was completely embedded, and actually some of the shots, we talked about this. This is the thing I never said. This is the secret. I feel like I'm going over wanky here, but it's the shots, the travelling shots through the landscape. It was talked about as the visual equivalent of Hardy's narration of both landscape, but also a wrathful God. There is a wrathful God in Broadchurch. There you go. Have that. Happy Thursday.
Blimey.
This one's there.
Not enough actors.
Hello there, I'm Toby Smith, the development producer. This might be me misremembering, but I think I recall an interview, Chris, in which you described the show as having been aggressively plotted.
Yeah.
And I just wonder whether you could unpack that as to what you meant by it and what it entailed for you and everyone kind of following on from your writing.
It just meant I got really cross doing it. No, it's so if I had a whiteboard, I'd show you. Basically, it's just really just plotting to the structure of an ITV hour. So making sure that was huge cliffhangers. So myself and Sam, the script exec who I work with, we storyline together, and that involves sort of 2 or 3 days in front of a whiteboard. You divide it into 4. I divide each act into 6 beats. I make sure each act break has what we call, just like a mini cliffhanger, so like a gasp moment. You go, oh, and you have to go and make a cup of tea, but you're definitely going to come back. Then I do that with the second act, and the third, and the fourth, and then the end of the fourth act has to be the biggest cliffhanger of the episode. But it just always so that those beats aren't scenes, but they can divide up into scenes. So you get a real sense of the shape. I just really, in a way, then if it's plotted that way, quite tightly, and it's always progressing, it hopefully earns you the space for the emotion. So you're always feeling, when you're in the emotion, you're always not far away from another good plot progression, really. So that was what we did. We worked pretty hard at that, but that's fun, to be honest. Also, if you plot it really tightly, then the writing is much more enjoyable.
Thank you. The lady at the end of the row.
Hello, my name is Grania. I'm a producer at ITV. It's kind of a twofold question, really. Firstly, did you have a target audience in mind who you imagined would watch the show, if you had like a profile, or who you imagined would watch it? And B, considering the success of the show, do you think that perhaps, because it was both male and female, kind of across the board, a water cooler moment for both sexes, that maybe it's not often you see, whodunits, which maybe more males would watch, intertwined so closely with, say, an emotional drama, which maybe more females would watch? Do you think maybe that's the reason behind its success?
Okay.
I can answer the first bit of who. I just wanted everyone to watch it. I know that sounds really shallow, but and then everyone did, and that was really weird. So
I think it's again, when Chris alluded to Cracker and Prime Suspect and even Inspector Morse and those great dramas, and now Scott and Bailey and those other things, when you can find crime that allows you to have a narrative that gives everyone a kind of comfort factor, so you sit back and then you create great characters and great emotional moments on top of that, that's for everybody. And there was no question for us, and I think that's the reason you took it to ITV as well, is it's the universal channel and there's a breadth there. And when you can crack that and make it good, there is no better feeling. So that was, for us, it was as many as possible, definitely. And the male-female thing, I don't think you ever think about.
No, we never talked about that. I mean, we talked about it being mainstream, and actually, I guess, the thing we talked about, and again, it's sort of remnants of things that you remember as a viewer, but for me, I always remember that the ITV logo used to be a heart, and that always feels to me really important for that channel, even now, that ITV audiences connect with emotion. And so, in a way, when we were talking about an emotional thriller, it felt like the most obvious place for it to sit, because I don't know, it just felt connected. So I hope what people connect with is the emotion and the character. And it's deliberately constructed as a big ensemble with different age ranges, and there's a lot of female characters in there very deliberately, So there's that, but it wasn't designed that way. It just fell that way because that was the story in a funny way.
Thank you. I think we've time for one more question. I'm going to go to the lady, just to make it hard, the person with the microphone in the middle. Towards the back, yeah.
Hi, my name is Alex. My question, kind of a two-part question. I think you answered a little bit about it, about the American version. Why did you decide to do an alternative version and not just show this brilliant British version to the American audience? And also, what is going to be different? Is the American version going to be a bit more glossier, or is there going to be a difference, really, in the American version?
I can answer the first one. James can maybe answer the second one. I think British dramas, Downton was watched by many millions of Americans. Contemporary British drama doesn't generally get watched by that many Americans. However successful it is, you might get a tiny percentage of the population, which is what Broadchurch, the UK version, got. So there was an opportunity to tell the same story on a different scale to a much bigger American audience who would never really watch the UK version. So that's the fundamental reason. It's because the story is so universal, we really felt it could travel in that way. So that was that one.
I don't think the word glossy is going to be kind of in our vocabulary when we make it stuff. It's going to be, it's the DNA of the same show. It's everything that made Broadchurch so special. We want to take that and make it even more special in America, but find the nuances and the kind of the things that make it unique to the Grace Point, this new place that we're going to create and stuff. So it will be new and it'll be different, but the same as well. And we're on that journey at the moment, discovering kind of what it's going to be. But it won't be a kind of a horrible Hollywood remake or anything like that. Not if I've got anything to do with it.
It's also, I should say, like, because I started writing in theatre, and the idea of having different productions of a play is completely normal. And I've been really lucky. I've had plays performed around the world. So I don't see. It's really odd that people seem. It's nice. People seem quite possessive about the UK version. Go, well, why would you want to make it in America? It's like, well, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you transpose it and put it in a different landscape and with different ensemble and things? So it just feels interesting, to be honest. And like Jane said, it was very well received over there critically. Nobody really watched it. It was very small audience figures, and I think it's just fun, and to have another iteration is just interesting. But to be honest, our main focus is on doing another great story for ITV. That's our big thing.
Thank you. Yes. Well, we have run out of time. But if you want to tell us anything about Series 2.
Well, this is what happens.
Oh, we've run out of time. If only you'd asked earlier.
Olivia, do you want to say anything about Series 2?
Yeah, I know loads.
Even that's probably going to get some time. We have run out of time. We could sit here all night talking about Broadchurch, I think, which shows how brilliant the show was. I just want to thank the panel for coming along and talking about such an interesting way, and brilliant questions from you guys as well, and to RCS, of course. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.